Hi Sue, how's it going?
All right, thanks. So I'm trying to do several things at the moment. Just bear with me.
I share your pain. Every council meeting I have, I end up looking at about four different, like NASA, and 4 different screens, and they're all doing something at the same time.
That's the one.
I'll let you crack on. I'll just mute myself.
Very shortly, people. Okay, Chair, you're now being live on YouTube and recorded at the same time. So over to you.
Thank you, Sue. So good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to East Devon District Council's virtual Housing Company Task and Finish Forum meeting on the 8th of October 2020. I'm your chairman, Councillor Dan Ledger. I would like to welcome anyone here watching the meeting via the live stream. All participants today are taking part remotely, as well as being live streamed. The meeting is being recorded, so please bear this in mind throughout, and may I remind you to be careful with your language. May I also remind members that the Code of Conduct applies throughout the meeting. We also reserve the right to remove and disconnect any participant who is disrupting the meeting by whatever means. As this Task and Finish Forum meeting is dependent on an internet connection and a power supply, in the event of a break in the internet connection or a power cut, please bear with us as we try to reconnect. After 15 minutes, if we are not able to reconnect, we'll consider this meeting adjourned and reconvene at a later date. Please check the committee page on our website for details. Please make sure all phones are turned off and are on silent, and make sure all your microphones are muted when you're not speaking to avoid any background noise levels. Keep points short and do not repeat any points that have already been made, and please do not interrupt. If you wish to comment, please raise your electronic blue hand and wait to be called. All councillors have been sent the agenda for today's meeting. Any member of the public wishing to view the agenda can do so by visiting our website, eastdevon.gov.uk. We'll now start the meeting by doing a roll call of the committee members here present. Can you please now unmute your microphone, and when you hear your name, please confirm by saying present. When you have confirmed you are present, please mute your microphone again. Over to you, Alethea.
We've got Councillor Ledger.
Present.
Councillor Armstrong.
Present.
We've had apologies from Councillor Blakey. Councillor Davey.
Present.
We've had apologies from Councillor Hall. Councillor Hayward.
Present, thank you.
Councillor Moulding.
Present.
Councillor Parr. Do we have Councillor Parr? Don't
Doesn't look like it, Alethea.
Councillor Rylance.
Present, just.
And Councillor Thomas.
Present.
Thank you. So just to confirm that we are quorate.
Dan, you're on mute.
Always the case. Okay, so we'll start off with agenda item number 1, terms of reference, and the terms of reference as agreed by Cabinet are to assist the council ensuring East Devon Homes Limited, the housing company derived from the council is fit for purpose by re-evaluating the business model, considering alternative business models, its role in the delivery of housing generally, and how it might meet the aspirations of the council in relation to affordable housing, working with the Housing Review Board and the Housing Revenue Account to explore options for housing delivery. Does anyone have any comments that they want to wish to make at this point? Perfect, we'll move on. So agenda item number 2, public speaking. There are no members of the public listed to speak. Agenda item number 3, appointment of a vice chairman. Could we please have nominations for vice chairman? Councillor Rowland, you wish to speak?
Sorry, Chair, I actually wanted to speak under the previous item, public speaking, which is why I raised my blue hand. Can I just ask for clarification? If councillors taking part today aren't members of the forum, when will we be given an opportunity to speak?
Before each item, it will go to non-committee members and then come into the task and finish forum.
Okay, thanks for clarification. Thank you.
No problem. So members, could we please ask for nominations for vice chairman?
Can I suggest Councillor Ian Thomas?
Do I have a seconder for that?
No, can I suggest Councillor Ian Hall, who was very much involved in the housing TAF that was carried out 2 or 3 years ago. He's not here today because he's on holiday, but I'd like to put his name forward.
Okay, so we'll first take the recommendation from Councillor Davey. Do I have a seconder for that?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Councillor Hayward will second that.
Thank you. And then just going to Councillor Mouldings, do we have a seconder for that?
Doesn't look like it.
No. Okay, so could we just take that to a vote? We'll just do it by a simple yes or no, green tick. Well, all members in agreement?
You've got 6 votes there for Councillor Ian Thomas to be vice chairman.
So that is carried. Congratulations to Councillor Ian Thomas. I look forward to working with you.
Thank you for the picture.
So if we move to agenda item 4A, declarations of interest. This will be done by a roll call.
Okay, so Councillor Ledger,
None.
Councillor Armstrong,
None.
Councillor Davey,
None.
Councillor Hayward,
None, thank you.
Councillor Moulding.
None.
Do we have Councillor Helen Parr? Nope. So Councillor Rylance
None.
and Councillor Thomas.
None.
Thank you.
Thank you. So if we move on to agenda item 4B, dates of the future meetings. So the forum needs to decide on the programme of meetings. Can I invite members of the forum to put forward any comments? Councillor Rylance?
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to suggest that we probably should have meetings fairly regularly. I suggest monthly. Would that suit every other? Well, what do the other people think? I just feel like it's something we really need to be focusing on quite proactively, and I don't think it's one of these forums that we can just go to quarterly meetings on. I think we really do need to get our skates on with this. What do other people think?
Okay, thank you. Councillor Thomas?
Thank you, Chair. I think this is a little bit cart before the horse, to be totally honest, because I think what we really need before we decide how often we need to meet,
is what we're actually planning to look to achieve, the timescale we're looking to achieve it within, and what resources we're going to need to do that. So I don't know whether you can actually do this, and sorry to be disruptive at such an early stage, but for me, you know, this is something that should come further down the line.
So are you making a proposal just to move it to the end of the agenda, or
Well,
take it off until a following meeting?
I think that's altogether more sensible, Chair, because I'm not clear as exactly what the overall strategy of the company is going to be, what sort of objectives it's going to have, and the timescale those are going to be over. And that to me should really drive what we need to do and how often and when we need to do it and what we should be seeking to achieve. So if, you know, to make it simple, to move the programme, move the future meetings element to the end, I think would be eminently sensible.
So that's, can I take that as a proposal then?
Yes, please, if you would.
Could I take a seconder for that?
Yes, I'll second that. I have my blue hand up anyway, but I was actually going to say that before Ian said it. But I think dates of future meetings should be at the end. Thank you. I'll second it.
So if I see no more blue hands, can we just take a vote on that, please? Again, we'll just do the green tick for yes, X for no.
Okay, so you've got 6 people voting to move to decide about the dates of the future meetings at the end of the agenda.
Fantastic, so that's carried. So we'll move on to agenda item 5, current business model of East Devon Homes, purpose and challenges. So John Golding will present a report now. Over to you, John.
Thank you, Chair. So just to highlight the report that you've got on your agenda, I'll highlight some key issues and then obviously happy to take any questions. In terms of setting the context, the housing company was originally conceived as a vehicle to complement our social landlord role, not to duplicate the powers and the acquisition programme that we already deliver through our housing revenue account activity, but to complement it. There are numerous reports in the public domain that explains the thinking behind the establishment of East Devon Homes and the considerations and assumptions used what was 3 years ago now when we set up the housing company. The report on your agenda today was probably the most comprehensive report that went to Cabinet in March 2017. The vision and purpose of the company was clearly articulated in the business plan, which was approved by a housing company subcommittee. I think it's fair to say the environment has changed, but emphasis was placed on moving into the private rented market, providing better quality homes than other private landlords do locally, whilst returning a surplus to the council. So that was the kind of purpose that we established for the company at the time. And this sat with our investment and commercialisation agenda at the time and recognised some of the constraints that were imposed on the housing revenue accounts, or the social kind of landlord side. So there were constraints on borrowing, the right to buy was a concern, and the need to issue secure tenancies. So that was all part of the thinking behind the company. We were looking to meet a different housing need than we traditionally had serviced through our social landlord activity, as I say, private renting in that respect. The idea was to start small, see how the company developed, look at the options for moving in different directions if the early experiences of running the company actually encourage this. I think it's fair to say a really cautious approach was initiated. So the company had no staff, no assets, no budget, and therefore incurred no costs. The idea was to, initially at least, unashamedly generate some surpluses to go back into the council's general fund. The company was established at a time when government were encouraging innovation, and there was a real trend towards local authorities setting up housing companies. The initial business plan reflected a fairly risk-averse approach, which may have limited the company's ambitions in hindsight, but equally it didn't result in poor investment decisions. We did quite a detailed SWOT analysis, included a risk register in the business plan, which highlights some of the thinking at the time. The business plan had a vision, it had values, a purpose. It looked at the role of the board and the directors, and it also included a series of operational plans, we called them, which looked at a range of scenarios and viability considerations. It looked at financing, it had operating account projections. It also looked at state aid. There's an issue of state aid in terms of the company borrowing, and it did quite a detailed risk analysis. So we have a company with directors. It's a company that's wholly owned by the council. There's a shareholder agreement and quite detailed governance arrangements in place. We've looked at a number of projects and potential schemes for the company through the lens of the business plan, and they've either proven not to be financially viable in terms of the aspirations of the business plan, or we have directed the opportunity through to the housing revenue account. And our acquisition of the Sailors' Rest is perhaps an example of that. Some time ago, we recognised the need for either a change in direction, perhaps a less restrictive business plan, or to adjust our risk appetite and take a different approach. And that's welcome the TAF being set up, because it will enable us to do that. The report on your agenda provides lots of background, and I've highlighted some of the key features, but happy to answer any questions that the committee have rather than ramble on too long. Thank you.
Thank you, John. So I'll first invite non-members to speak by raising their virtual blue hand, and then we'll move into members of the Task and Finish Forum. So Councillor Jack Rowland. Jack, you're on mute.
You got your own back, didn't you? Thank you, Chair. I really feel, having looked at this because of the history with the company, that this is a great opportunity for the housing company really to be looking into investment into social housing where possible as a priority, and to treat this as a long-term investment. The reason I'm saying that is we have an increasing number of people that are on the council waiting list. The amount that's been spent in recent years spent on private accommodation for homeless people that could be better invested in providing more permanent accommodation as a helping point for those people affected and helping them to rebuild their lives. We've got a potential problem coming down the track fairly soon, because out of 58,000 people that are currently in eligible employment in East Devon, there are 19,700 on furlough. That's 29%, and it's the second highest in this part of the world. So my concern is obviously what's going to happen when the current scheme comes to its end at the end of this month, because that could have a knock-on effect for what happens with people's finances and potential need for more social housing to help people. I noticed that the latest issue of the Local Government Association First magazine states that the government has published its prospectus inviting bids for its £12.2 billion investment in affordable housing. I'm just wondering if the housing company could take opportunities of that investment, and also to explore purchasing brownfield sites that exist in East Devon, where there's already been residential housing planning permission that's been granted, sometimes years ago, with subsequent revisions periodically, but still no development has taken place. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Rowland. Does any non-forum members wish to speak at this time? No. So I invite members to raise their blue hands and speak when they wish. Deathly silent. Councillor Hayward.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I can only reinforce what Councillor Rowland has said. It's a golden opportunity, and whilst the reason for doing it may have altered slightly, it won't have altered that materially. Yes, it can generate some surpluses and some revenue for council, but most it can do social good. And whether that is developing socially affordable houses, socially rented houses, or dipping into the private rental market, which I personally would not wish council to do. I mean, there's enough of that, unfortunately. We can actually take a far higher moral stance on this. But going beyond that, you know, as the economic portfolio holder, what we're hearing is that there is an economic hit, a huge economic hit coming, and it's tied into the economy of East Devon, into the things such as the poverty working group. Everything is interrelated. So if we were to go down the route of, you know, making this a viable contributor to housing stock and providing a social need, we can tie it into things such as developing skills. You know, we were talking about having skills centres in East Devon. Well, why not create, as part and parcel of this, hand in glove, a skills centre to train our own plumbers, our own brickies, our own sparkies, our own bricklayers, and provide training, provide employment for East Devon residents, try and raise those base incomes that I know Councillor Ledger, Mr. Chair, you're always referring to, because we need to raise earnings in this area. So this seems a golden opportunity to try and do so much good, and it all ends up in the same thing. We're delivering houses, we can train people, we can provide jobs, we can stop people moving away from the area. It's frankly, for me, a win-win. And the sooner we get on with it and focus our minds and put due resource and investment into it, it can only deliver good for East Devon. You know, we often sit in these meetings and we rue why things haven't happened. Well, that's natural, you know, and that's politics. You know, why the previous bunch didn't do this, didn't do that, and what the next bunch have done. We can do that all day and it gets us frankly nowhere. What we can do is cross-party through forums such as this, is work for a better future for every resident of East Devon, because frankly, all of us will be outvoted or voted out or will retire at some point. But the legacy of what we do via these sort of things, and this, particularly this housing company, will be seen in East Devon for hundreds of years to come. And I'd like that to be my legacy, not squabbling about why it hasn't been delivered so far. Let's all press ahead together and get this thing running. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Hayward. John, you've got your hand up. Would you like to come back?
Yeah, if I may, Chair. So to pick up those points, the need for more affordable housing, or better still, cheaper social housing is uncontestable. We see it day in, day out by the number of people approaching us as homeless, being made homeless on our housing register. So we do need a significant drive towards that. And I think later on your agenda, you'll see some of the figures that have been produced for us in terms of housing needs. So that's not an issue at all. We need a significant increase in the amount of affordable housing in the district. What the housing company are restricted by is, firstly, it can't bid for government funding because it's not a registered provider. The Affordable Homes Programme is only available to registered providers, but your council landlord role, you can bid for funding. So we can't direct that funding through the company, but we can through the housing revenue account if we bid for the funding. And the other big issue is affordable housing requires some form of significant subsidy. So the current business model that we've used for the company doesn't achieve that, because the rents don't cover the cost of borrowing for either development or or property acquisitions. And we have a programme through our housing revenue account, and every single purchase that we make, we have to subsidise from the housing revenue account. So in terms of the company, it just doesn't stack up against the current business plan, excepting that we need to change the business plan. Hopefully that addresses those questions, inquiries, Chairman.
Thank you, John. Councillor Davey.
Thank you, Chair. I'm wondering if we've been able to draw on the experience of other local authorities in setting up these kind of companies, and what their experience has been, and whether there's any lessons that we can learn from that. I've got some interest in the governance of this. The board of directors seems to me maybe is a little too close to council. I don't know, but should there be more, shall I say, ordinary councillors on that, and possibly even expertise from outside the council? I don't know if that's an option. But I just wondered about the governance and if there are other models available. But my main one was to ask what the experience of other authorities has been.
Well, I know our neighbours in Exeter have already embarked on something like this, and by all accounts, they are being quite successful with it. I don't know if any officers can back that up.
Chair, it's John. Yeah, Exeter subsidising their company quite significantly. They've taken a different approach to us. When we set up the company, we considered lots of experiences across the country, and they vary enormously. Some are primarily focused on affordable housing. Some, like us, took a different tack and were looking at plugging what they perceive to be gaps in the market, but still delivering housing. There's a lot to learn from what others do. What I've been reading most recently is that, partly related to the pandemic, I suppose, that there's been a huge slowdown in investment from these companies, partly as a result of the kind of construction industry slowdown, and then that may pick up in time. But perhaps we need to rescan what's going on elsewhere in these local housing companies.
Thanks, John. Councillor Howe.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm obviously not on this TAF, but thank you for letting me speak, because I had a brainwave and I have to catch them occasionally when I do. It's just a bit of a left ball as I was sitting here listening to you guys. What about a direction for this company to help self-builds? You know, we can get the land, we can purchase the land, we can put planning permission on the land, and I see Mr. Freeman's in here as well, so he can advise on where we are with self-builds. But then as part of a learning enterprise, we could help people learn the skills to build their homes as well. We need a bit more of a gelling with other companies, other assistants, like teaching, like bricklaying and everything else, and what your expertise is in, Mr. Chair, you know the trades, to help people maybe build their own homes as well. So, and of course, at the end of it, there is a valued property there that we should be able to recoup the money of the land from, and a bit extra, I would hope, as the owner owns their property or part of their property, etc. There's many shapes and forms, but I just think education, assisting someone to get their own home, and let's face it, some of these people are desperately in need of homes. It's not just people in the middle classes that want to build their own homes. There are an awful lot of not so well people off. If we have a large enough area of land and have 20 or 30 homes in one area on a self-build program, you could actually really make a difference to a lot of people in a wide variety of ways, bringing people together, other groups together to help them build those homes. So as I say, thank you for letting me speak. It was just a quick sideball, but hopefully you'll take it under the right advisement. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Howe. Councillor Thomas?
Thank you, Chair. Sorry about that. My big concern, I mean, I wanted to start off looking forward rather than looking back, and I can see Simon's horror even from here, and he's miles away in Seaton, but I did raise some very significant concerns and underlying principles last time round, which, without gloating and without any pride at all, have in many respects proven to be correct. The way really we failed abjectly last time to deliver anything like what was required. So for me, we've got to start, and we're already seeing we're flying in numerous different directions. Firstly, looking at what are we actually trying to achieve? I mean, is it social good, which we've quite clearly aware requires a significant element of subsidy, or is it financial reward? Last time it was reflecting alternative ways of making investment to generate revenue funds for the general fund. And this is where an important distinction comes in. We're looking at a housing company in the general fund, yet we deliver our social housing through the housing revenue account. I've struggled with this because I think this is one of the big problems we had. Housing revenue account is well placed to deliver social housing in relation to sourcing funding, but also, more importantly, it understands the market. It understands who else is in this space. And bear in mind, again, as John has thankfully reiterated, that the company is not able to bid for government funding because it wouldn't be a registered provider. And what makes us actually think as a company we can deliver social housing better than as our housing revenue account? So the question is, what do we actually want to do? And I'm deeply concerned that we're already talking about the idea of looking at taking over training. Exeter College has an enormous expertise in this and significant construction training resources based around the Cranbrook campus. There's a lot of work going on there. You saw Boris last week at Exeter College learning how to lay a brick, and the chap there did it significantly better than he did. So, and the point with this is the key element of point that we must get is focus. If we're looking to run this as a business rather than a council, if we don't focus and be clear on exactly what we're trying to do, who else is in this space, what the scale of the market is, what our aspirations are, but most importantly, what we didn't do last time. And you'll remember, Simon remembers when I came from leader at that point, I asked him, how much have we spent, Simon? We've achieved nothing, you're telling me. A number of times we've talked about, yeah, well, we haven't actually been able to purchase anything, or John and his guys haven't managed to find anything that was suitable. I said, well, how much have we actually spent of the general fund on this company? Well, we haven't actually spent anything. Why is that? Well, we've covered it with our expertise. Our people employed by the housing revenue account have done it in their spare time. Now, this was one of the big things for me. If you're starting any organization and you want a proposition to succeed, whatever it is, one of the key success elements of that is focus. But also the second one is you've got to give it chance. What we didn't do last time is we didn't invest anything like enough in terms of the opportunity that we perceived was there. But equally well, we've got to look at it in terms of skills. None of us is good at everything. Our housing revenue team are extremely good at doing housing revenue stuff, but that is not the same as operating a commercial business proposition in a different space. Now, it might sound harsh, but we've got to recognize that. And the first question for me would be, going into any of these things in resourcing, is not just give it chance or watch it fail. Do we have the skills in-house if we're trying to do it in-house again? I don't believe we do. And for reasons I've mentioned earlier, I would caution against even going that way. But if we haven't, how can we acquire them? Do we acquire them through recruitment, through a housing company? Or do we even look at it rather more strategically and say, well, actually, we recognize we don't have a great expertise in this area, but we want it to succeed. But we recognize other partners in whom we might be able to directly invest, with whom we believe we can actually do rather better than thinking we can do it on our own at a small scale. So, there are also, my big worry again, we've drifted. Last time it was one of the prime elements, John's played it down a bit, but one of the prime elements here was actually looking to raise revenue funding for the general fund. It wasn't to provide social housing, quite specifically not. It was something that was potentially for the longer term, but only when cash surpluses were being generated. Another big risk is not doing this through the HRA. If the perception is that by looking to deliver social goods, social housing, actually effectively in competition with the HRA, why are we doing it? Are we doing it because we perceive that there's actually some protection against right to buy? Because that was one of the big threats before, and it's a big threat to HRA, is if we actually acquire significant amounts of housing stock. We know what the government's saying at the moment in terms of wanting to go back to encouraging people to buy their homes. But again, how do we stand legally? Henry, I know I had concerns before that if we don't actually, if we're seeing this as being specifically a reason to avoid right to buy, then we potentially have a legal challenge and a very major risk. So, you know, I'm not trying to pour cold water on this, but what I do think is rather than flying off in numerous different directions, let's be quite clear what we're trying to achieve. Because I would question if the objective is social good and social housing, why not do it within our housing revenue account of that function and then invest in that function at an area where we've got expertise? Where does the company help? Sorry, Chair, but I didn't want to get into too much, but there's obviously unfortunately so much background in this from when it was first the first genesis back in 2017, and John will remember the discussions we had then.
No, it's a broad brush agenda item. It needs to cover a wide variety of things. It's to encourage discussion, so it's welcomed. We'll move on to Councillor Rylance.
Thank you, Chair. I guess that probably many of us in our community work will be aware that there is a glaring need for the people of East Devon for a housing that is truly affordable. And I don't mean affordable by the government definitions. I mean the housing that they can actually afford. We all know we have in our wards people who are caught on the cleft stick of incredibly high accommodation costs and really quite low wages. Our building, our sort of fairly unrestrained building programme over the last 15 years has really fairly majorly avoided tackling that. We aren't showing any more, well, we're showing only a little bit more affordability than we did 15 years ago, to be honest. We have thousands of people sitting on our social housing waiting list, and that is no accident. That is because people simply cannot afford to move out of their parents' homes. It's because they are stuck in tenancies that are extremely insecure and being asked to move every 6 months. It's because they are in very particular circumstances and don't qualify for housing benefit. I mean, there are all sorts of reasons why people really desperately need truly affordable housing. And to my mind, none of the things that this council has done over the last 15 years has actually delivered that for people. And that's what we should be doing. We should be having a house, a roof over your head and 4 walls around you should be one of the basics that we shouldn't even be negotiating about this. There should not be homelessness in a place where there is so much building happening, yet there is. There's hidden homelessness and there's actual homelessness. So my question really, I suppose, for John and anybody who knows the ins and outs, I'm not claiming any great knowledge of how the finances of this council work. And incidentally, I would very much take issue with what Councillor Thomas recently said about East Devon Council being a business. It's not a business, it's a council. Businesses can change their mission statement relatively at will and decide what they want to do. We have statutory services, so we can never be a business. We are operating in a business-like way, but we are not a business. I completely agree with everything that Councillor Hayward said about wanting to deliver a social good. That surely should be the aim of what we're doing. We aren't here to make money as such. We're here to improve the lives of our residents. And if we're not doing that, then what on earth are we doing? And what I would question is what the housing company has been doing for the last 3 years since it was set up. That's my long ramble, and it's leading to a question probably to John and to Simon about whether it would be possible, given that the housing revenue account can only buy houses that at the moment that are already built. At the moment, what we are doing is buying houses that have already been built and where the profit, so to speak, has gone to somebody else. can we use the housing company to build houses at cost and sell them at cost to our social housing stock? That's my question. Could we use it for that? Because at the moment it's not being used for anything, so there's no precedent whatsoever about what it does, and we really should be using it for something, because I think, you know, it could do some immense good. And, you know, incidentally, I do agree with Councillor Thomas about, you know, maybe a partnership with Exeter College. There's no point reinventing the wheel on this. They have very, very good classes there. However, we will actually need to organise that, and that's one of the things we need to be talking about. And this is a task and finish forum on which we can talk about such things. So yeah, so I don't know, Simon, John, can you remember what my question was now? I'll leave you with it.
If I can, Chair, and I'm sure John will probably come in afterwards. So just going back to the point, I think from what you're saying, Councillor, it's the housing revenue account you're looking at in terms of, so the housing revenue account can build houses. That's the place to do it in if you're looking at social housing. By adding a company on top, we can look at it, but I don't think it's actually adding anything to it in terms of a company building houses and then sending it to the HRA. You might as well just do that within the HRA if that's what you're trying to achieve. The company, reiterate what's been said, was basically originally envisaged to make money. And I know I get the point what you're saying in terms of the business, but it was just seen as a way of generating income to help us balance our general fund, to help pay for other services where we had a gap in our funding. Now, if we want to move away from that, that's absolutely fine. Me and John are quite happy to take direction and go wherever necessary. But I'm sure in terms of building additional social housing, John will probably agree, the place to do that is in the HRA, and we can look at how we might extend the programme, how we might fund that. But the company wasn't set up to do that in terms of the principles.
Thank you, Simon. Henry, do you want to come in at that point?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I mean, effectively, it's reiterating what Simon's saying, but I think it's very important, perhaps, just to take. It's kind of taking stock, isn't it? Which I appreciate what this TAF is doing, but rather than perhaps focusing on it from the perspective of the housing company, is to set the direction that the council wants to go in, whether it's to deliver social housing, whether it's to plug a funding gap. And then determine what the appropriate mechanism is to do that. Because I think some of the discussion here is about using the housing company to do something where it to be without actually taking a step back and determining what it is that you necessarily, or what it is that you want to deliver, and then putting in place the appropriate vehicles to do it. Because certainly the conversations at the time where this is to deliver a gap in the funding, and it is an entity that will operate separate from the council, so it's not subject to the same restrictions. It can operate in the commercial world, and it can plough funding back into the council. It wasn't done from a social perspective, although there was a benefit in terms of the type of housing, the quality of the housing, and the rents and so on that would have been charged. And that doesn't fit delivery of social housing, not least because of the RP position, but because of the housing revenue account, where you don't have that extra layer of complexity. You can just deliver it. So for me, I think that the TAF and the council needs to take a step back and just go back to the basics of what it wants to deliver, and then determine what the appropriate way of delivering that is. Thank
you, Henry. We'll go back out to Peter Faithful wasn't here when we started, so we take Peter Faithful and our leader, and then we'll come back into the forum again. Peter.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for allowing me in or talk. Basically, it's just following on from Councillor Thomas and basically what other people are saying, but what I perceive of a housing company is about producing, commercially building houses, but standing by what we preach. We want, you know, so many developers haggle their way out of affordable housing every time, and if we want the level of affordable housing, such as outside of built-up area boundaries, where you have the higher number, then we stand by what we, you know, practice what you preach, rather than a company trying to get yourself tangled up over whether you're doing this or whether you're doing that. If it's a commercial company, but doing it what we are trying to get all the developers to do, developing the affordable housing at the right level that we're asking everybody else to do. Is that all right?
Thank you, Councillor Faithful. Councillor Arnott.
Thank you, Chair, for letting me back in. I'll be very brief. Fascinated by everything that's been said so far, as it's obviously a core part of the relatively new administration. And there are some really interesting questions that have come up, and I suppose I'd just like to pose them back, not to be answered now, but just I think they're part of this whole, as Henry was saying, this is an opportunity to raise ideas, isn't it? So drawing on Mike's suggestion, how could we work with self-builders and what are the practicalities of that? How could we work within the envelope of community land trusts, looking at the problem that Ian rightly raised about right to buy? How can we, in the current climate, draw down on what are meant to be available green recovery pounds that are promised by the government, and how can we dovetail their avowed mission in with that, which is also central to us as well? How do we ensure, if we do go ahead through the housing company or even the HRA, that we are managing our procurement policies very tightly? This is a subject I know, Chair, is close to your heart, and it's very close to mine as well. You know, one person might be able to build a house for 130 and the person down the road for 110. And we need to really look at that, however we go ahead, that we're not including other people's overheads and markups if we're controlling it ourselves. The other question is, what, again, picking up on Ian and others' point, what is it that a housing company could do that doing it through the HRA cannot happen? In other words, flipping it around the other way. And then finally, one observation, if I may, which is if your direction of travel eventually would be to look back into the HRA to deliver some of this, I'm just wondering whether there's a melding together of the two operations, so to speak. In other words, whether we need to, it's been very helpful having Ian and Simon's account really of, you know, this was to make money before, and clearly it isn't. It is to create properties for people to live in. And it would be nice if we made some money. I think that's the way we need to look at it. So I think that's, you know, not suggesting you abolish yourselves by the end of this meeting, but the question is how across the council these things can work more closely together. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Arnott. I think we'll move back into the forum. Any non-members, they will have a chance to speak after Ed Freeman's report. So if we could save it till then. So moving on to Councillor Andrew Moulding.
Thank you, Chairman. Can I very much agree with Ian Thomas that I think if this is going to work, it probably needs to be through the HRA. And what I would like us to investigate is whether we could set up an arm's length company, a not-for-profit company, whose objectives are both to provide and help to provide social and affordable housing. And indeed, that not-for-profit company could be set up in such a way that any profits and proceeds from that company go back into the council to help with the gap in funding. That group, that company, arm's length company, would be highly skilled and motivated with a management group that could potentially be using local building contractors or even link up with self-build. And my view would be that their sole intention would be to assist with providing social and affordable housing. And that should be our main objective. But through an arm's length company, I feel we could meet all our objectives and would have the appropriate skills. Because at the moment, if it was through the HRA under the current management and all deference to John Golding and his team, they freely admit they haven't got the necessary skills. But with a highly motivated, arm's length company with good management, potentially using local, highly skilled craftsmen, I think we could do something really great for East Devon. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Moulding. Councillor Thomas, you should come back.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, I think, Councillor, just to come back to Councillor Ryland's comment, I don't believe I ever said the council was a business in any of the discussion this morning, just to avoid any doubt. And I think we should, whilst I believe we should operate in a business-like manner in all our operations, that wasn't what I said. But I think what we do need to recognise is that if we're going to move into a space where a competition does, then we need to understand the value chain in those markets, where the money's delivered, where the profit's delivered, and actually deliver that accordingly. And so I mean, that again highlights one of the big threats, because the council isn't a business, which makes, for me, it makes it a great risk and a questionable approach, which I think we got some flavour of last time, is that actually thinking we are a commercial organisation and a business and we have that expertise, because I don't believe we do. So the question then comes in again to picking up on Andrew's comment, his arm's length company. Now that actually, when you think that through and carry it beyond, he may well have a key in terms of some of this then. But the problem with that is, how is an arm's length company going to finance itself in terms of delivering a return for its shareholders, a commercial return? But equally well, of course, it does beg the question that, could we not then, could we have as an alternative, recognise that we don't have that expertise and actually look at whether we should look at a corporate acquisition of a local developer as an alternative route? Completely different approach, where we actually look at buying in the expertise and actually look to lead that company forward, possibly by helping its liquidity position if it's in a corporate period of corporate strife, which there may well be some acquisition opportunities around at the moment. That's a thought. HRA is a bit of a problem if we start building within HRA, then seeking to free up revenue for the general fund, because I think Simon will confirm, I think, that there were certainly significant restrictions on ability to lift funds revenue from the HRA and put it into the general fund. I'm not sure that would work. But as Simon again, I think, made a very pertinent point, if we're looking at, if the key objective going forward, and as Henry said as well, we shouldn't be looking at the vehicle and saying, what can it do? We should be looking at the objective and then looking at what's the best vehicle to achieve it. And I think it's a very fair point that recognising our strengths, our critical mass that we have in the organisation, that if the objective is to provide social housing, then a good start point is to look at the HRA as a vehicle to do it. And I think that would be something I would support, whether or not we go ahead with a housing company at all. Now, if we don't actually have any commercial aspirations in relation to homes or housing, or any particularly other business activity that we feel we've got a strategic strength to delivering, that was my reason for concern about the suggestion of going into training, where of course we've got Exeter College, as I highlighted earlier, and well versed on that, and actually pretty good at it and extremely well regarded. Why would we wish to compete with them? Surely we partner them if we're going to do that. We don't compete with them. Anyway, but that hopefully is helpful. But as I said, I just wanted to create that I'd never actually said that the council was a business this morning, so I wouldn't want that to taint any of the conversation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Thomas. John, do you want to come in back in at that point?
Yeah, if I may, Chair. A few years ago, the council did build through the HRA. We had 4 or 5 sites that were mainly infill sites that we delivered through the housing revenue account, and we basically brought in the expertise consultants to help us deliver. We got some government funding to do that as well. I think one of the things that's missing in terms of context is, I think for the last 30 years, the government's main delivery vehicle for delivering affordable housing has been through housing associations or registered providers. I think it's fair to say that's failed. That's not met the level of demand that there has been. But that's actually prevented a lot of our ambitions in terms of increasing council housing over the years, because national policy has been really against local authorities delivering on the sort of scale that we're talking about. And the other thing in terms of context is, in terms of the housing revenue account, there are pressures on the housing revenue account. So some of the financial pressures that will compete with, if you like, developing or acquiring on a larger scale are things like our carbon neutral program so we need to invest in the stock, significant investment in the stock. The tenant safety program, we prioritise compliance issues, whether it's gas safety, fire safety, and the things coming out of the Grenfell inquiry require greater investment in our housing stock. So that kind of competes with our ability to deliver more affordable housing. We'd like to do it all, but in terms of the finances, it's a ring-fenced account, as Councillor Thomas mentioned. We have to live within our means, if you like, within the housing revenue account, and that limits the amount of borrowing that we can undertake in terms of the cost of delivering new affordable housing. So there's some constraints there that we have to operate under, which the TAF need to be aware of. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Councillor Hayward.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just coming back to a couple of points that Councillor Thomas has raised. Yes, there is an inherent risk within the HRA model with right to buy, and with the government flip-flopping its policies every 20 minutes at the moment, what local authority would want to make any long-term commitments, given they could be overturned at some point in the future? So that is something to bear in mind. The commerciality issues that have been raised, well, of course, it's all interrelated. You know, what is commerciality? Is a council buying a shopping centre in Macclesfield when it knows nothing about shopping centres? Is that a wise and prudent thing to do? But we have the means to invest, and that might be in our own assets. It might be in other things. I mean, arguably, if it's just about making profit, and that's what I'm getting a flavour of with this thing, that it's simply a profit-making exercise. Well, it hasn't done very well because it hasn't delivered a penny yet. So, but perhaps that's because the focus hadn't been there. But if it's just about profit, well, the district council, as the planning authority, seems to be in a prime position. We know where we can build. We're the authority that gives out planning consent. So arguably, if we're going to look at delivering profit, this council should just be buying every bit of land in every area where housing is permitted, and then we land bank it. It'll return a profit eventually. You know, we control who builds on it. We can then say to those developers, well, we'll allow you to build on it as a partner, but you must deliver social houses according to our policy. You've got to be an ethical developer. And I know that might be an oxymoron, but that's what we can dictate. We buy the land, we use it to turn a profit. We buy the land, we use it for a mixed development of social, affordable, rented and private housing. Ploughing the profits back in. How it's then divided out is for the bean counters, no disrespect, Simon, but I'm a bean counter too, for them to work out. You work out the legalities, tell us how we can do it. That's what private companies do. They work around the legislation and they find gaps. Now, if we want to, we're either going to have to do one thing or the other. Act in a commercial way, which means taking some risks, bending rules, or we become a supine authority and we just buy the most simplest thing with the lowest risk. That's not going to deliver any returns, and we may as well just give up now. The final point is, as we're buying into private developers, I personally can declare I have no close friendships with any property developers, but I'd rather we stand firm and force developers to maintain their obligations under 106 and SIL. With it certainly not jumping into bed with them. That would be the worst possible case for me, because on balance, not many of them deliver what they actually promise. Finally, in terms of skills, I do take Councillor Thomas's point. Exeter and Devon are delivering skills, but it's not necessarily about us doing the training. I don't expect, Councillor Ledger, the chair, to start training people. I know he's changed careers, but to start training people to go up scaffolds. That's not what I'm suggesting. What I'm suggesting is perhaps we can invest as an authority in the buildings. So we can invest in a Cranbrook Training Academy. We can invest in an Axminster Training Academy. Let someone else do the training. We'll just provide the mechanism and the resource to do it. But this is why I'm really heartened about this forum, because yes, we are now tearing apart what has been, and we'll put it back together. And out of the end of that process will be the best outcomes, because we'll be committed. Whenever we decide how often we're going to meet, that will come down the line, but we can decide how we can best do it. There are no wrong answers. There is no negativity. No one's being a wet blanket about this. We're all pushing forward, but there are going to have to be some hard decisions made as to what we as a council want to be. We can't be on this all things to all men. We go down one route or we do down the other. And if we ultimately decide that it's social housing, then let HRA deal with it. Disband the housing company. We don't want to go down that route. We don't want the risk. We can't raise the finance. It's just too much hassle. And we aspire to deliver the things by another mechanism. We're all busy people. Officers are incredibly busy. Let's not waste time. But if there is an opportunity for this vehicle to deliver some good, some social good, then I'm all behind it. But we'll work together and we'll pick it apart. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hayward. I'm keen to move this agenda item on. So we've had a lot of discussion from, be it an ALMA, a joint venture, corporate acquisition of developers, land acquisitions, building through the HRA. We've had a lot of different options and opinions. I think one thing that I might want to move is ask Tim Child to go away and come back to the next meeting with a list of options that we can actually agree a direction upon, because frankly, I don't think we're going to agree it today. Councillor Davey.
Thank you, Chair. At the risk of mixing my metaphors, I think we're in danger of muddying the waters and then throwing out the baby with them. I think John has put in number one in the introduction the background to this, that he's been researching the changes and trends in the social housing sector, and explained why the housing revenue account is not the best vehicle to deliver the housing that East Devon sorely needs. And I think we've kind of grown to experience that neither is private development. And what we are proposing here is to form our own housing company. And I think John has done quite a lot of background work on that. There may be other models that we could also consider, and I'm very happy to do that. But I think he's done a lot of work on why the housing company is the best vehicle to deliver that.
Thank you, Councillor Davey. So I've got no other speakers. Tim, would that be possible to do something like I said before?
Yes, yeah, that's fine. So we, depending on when the date of the next half is, we'll come back with possible, I think probably at this stage, just possible structure, well, possible scenarios. I suppose from my perspective as an officer listening to this debate, I'm sensing a definite steer away from commercial to much more focus on housing need. But it's, I suppose, that grey area between the two that as an officer I'm probably not much clearer on. However, we can come back with possible different scenarios to then be discussed. I can certainly do that.
Thank you. Councillor Armstrong.
Well, thanks, Chair. Yeah, I've just been listening to all of this, and I think it would just be useful just for clarity, because we've talked around it a lot about the need for social housing, but I think it would be useful for this TAF to identify themselves, to stick up their hands and say, yes, Do we need more social housing? I think we're all assuming that everybody does, and that's one of the things we want to achieve. But I think if we can actually get that down in black and white, at least from this TAF and hopefully from the whole council at some point, that would be good. But I think we've also just got to be aware, and I understand that Tim is going to try and draw up some kind of, make some sense of all these comments that have been made. But I am anxious to just emphasise what John has said about the difficulty we have as a local authority delivering social housing. Because, as he says, the government has deemed that housing associations are the way that they want to do this. And so that puts us in quite a difficult position. If John needs to come back on me on that, if I've misunderstood, please do, John. But also the extra pressures that we've got on the HRA, and there are a heck of a lot of pressures on us to do all the carbon neutral stuff and the tenant safety and everything else that comes out of that. So I think it will be, just getting back to my original point, I think it would be useful just to clarify at least that we are all wanting to have more social housing, because I think that can be a marker in the sand, if you like. Then, you know, it's something, it's a starting point that we all want to do that. And, you know, there may be some people who don't want to actually admit that they don't want social housing, I don't know, but I think we've got to be honest about it from the start and just clarify that. I'll leave it at that for now. I might say something later. Thank you.
Thank you. Tim, you want to come back there?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I suppose picking up on a comment by Councillor Armstrong just now, actually. If we are to go down the route of this being driven by housing needs, social affordable housing, then I suppose there's something we need to have in the back of our minds regarding availability of land. So we talk about the HRA potentially delivering. Within the HRA portfolio, yes, there might be small pockets of land that we are able to identify, but I don't think, and I'm not that familiar with the HRA portfolio, but I don't think we're sat on sort of huge opportunities that we've not yet taken forward. So it would be very much sort of infilling potential garage sites and similar, but there's probably no huge opportunities, which then means in terms of land availability, we are out there competing for land and at values that relate to social and affordable, or one or the other. And I suppose just and John, I'm sure will know more than I do on this, but it will be a very, very tough market. You've got the housing associations, the RPs, already doing that. The big developers that we've spoken about earlier in the meeting, they already have arrangements, a lot of them have arrangements in place with the RPs. So we'd be breaking, I'm not saying we can't do it, but it would have chance, but we would be breaking into a market that's already very well represented with established relationships in place. So I suppose really it's just, there's a focus back towards the HRA, which is fine, but it's just around perhaps if we were looking at more of a commercial scenario out of this, then it's a different type of market. But if we are looking at social and affordable, there's that market's already in place, those relationships already there. And yes, we might be able to look at some bits of our own land, but they're going to be small ticket items, I suspect.
Thanks, Tim. John, do you want to come in as well at that point?
Chair, if I may, just to clarify, I think the HRA is the best vehicle for delivering social housing. I think the point I was trying to make, maybe not so well as I'd hoped, is that there are constraints on the HRA being able to do that, financial and other constraints. And we can't get away from the fact that social housing requires significant subsidy. That's how it's delivered, because as Tim rightly says, we've got very little land holdings. Most of the land is option. Most of the potential developable land in the short term is optioned by developers, and as again Tim says, a lot of the RPs have got arrangements with developers, and we've, over the years, since we've not been developing at any scale, we've lost the expertise and capacity through the HRA. That's not to say that can't be reversed. So hopefully that's clarified that point.
Thanks, John. So what is it that the forum wishes to do now? Is it that we note the report and we allow Tim to bring back a list of recommendations to the next meeting? Councillor Moulding?
Well, really, just going on to comment on John Golding's recent remarks, there is land at Millway Rise, Axminster, First Avenue, which has been sitting empty for about 5 years, which could accommodate probably up to 40 social homes. Now, that land is available. What a starting point that would be for our housing company to develop that piece of land, all for the benefit of the district council for social and affordable housing.
Henry, do you want to come in at that point?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Can I just go back to the comments I made earlier, that I think the starting point still needs to be the TAF needs to determine what it's trying to, or which direction it's trying to travel in terms of prioritising the end goal. Because, I mean, take Millway Rise. I don't think that's HRA land. I suspect that's general fund land. And so they've got an issue of who effectively develops, or whether it's available for the HRA. If it's in the HRA, then it's going to be difficult to transfer it to a company. You know, all these sort of interplaying issues have to be resolved for all the various pieces of land that we hold, or sites, or whatever it happens to be. So I think that, you know, the first issue really that needs to be resolved is the strategic directive here. You know, what is it that you want to do? What's the priority? Is it to deliver social housing? And I go back to then, well, how is the best way to deliver that? Looking at the various options. Or are you going to say, we've got a housing company, we want to use it, how can we use it? And I think, you know, there are two different prospects. And you know, it seems to me the conversation very much, we've got a company, what options are available? Andrew mentioned the not-for-profit company. Yeah, that's effectively an RP. You've got issues about registering as an RP, delivering that way, all sorts of things. And it just seems to me that the logic would say, go back to square one. What do we want to achieve? How will we then achieve it? Rather than looking at all the various options. If you want to maintain a housing company and utilise it, how can we best utilise it? You know, they're just two separate questions, and you might want to do both, and then sort of bring that work together. My only worry for the TAF will be that actually determining the strategic directive is going to be a massive piece of work in terms of all the sort of the housing needs assessments and all the rest of it. But you know, it is an important piece of work that needs to be done. So I think it might be that it's in the next few meetings you really hone down how you move forward. But perhaps the first job will be to just determine what exactly it is that you want to do in terms of that strategic directive, and bring a report back. I mean, to be honest, if that's going to be the driver, then John and Tim need to be involved, it seems to me, to bring back, you know, this is what we need in terms of housing numbers, the types of housing, even in a high brush. Ed as well will need to be involved. I don't think it probably necessarily just sits with Tim. I hope that helps.
Thanks, Henry. It was just Tim's running he's pretty much running up and heading up the TAF. That's why I aimed it at him. I know it will need John and Ed to have involvement, and obviously Simon as well. Councillor Pook and Councillor Rowland, will bring you in at the housing needs time. We've said it before. I think Councillor Pook joined in late. So Councillor Davey?
Yeah, I think Henry's pretty much preempted me. I was going to suggest that what we need to do now is define what we're actually trying to achieve as a council, whether it's social housing, whether it's affordable housing, whether it's just to enter the housing market. And it's been suggested that we'd just be delivering good quality housing. And I can see opportunities for kind of zero carbon housing here as well. But I think we need to define those aims and then decide what the best vehicle is to do that and look at some of the options.
Thank you, Councillor Davies. So I'll put it to the forum. What do we want to achieve from this TAF?
That's ominous.
Deathly silence. I think it goes back to the point then that this committee, well, this forum's unsure of what direction it wishes to take, and that we do need to bring back a report with a list of different options that we can consider at the next meeting and then decide on a direction there. Councillor Rylance?
Thank you, Chair. So to my mind, one of the problems that we have today on this TAF is that we're talking about the housing company. And we've just realised that actually a lot of us want to talk about something completely different. And I'm not sure this is entirely the right forum to be discussing whether or not we want more social housing, because actually we should be talking about the purpose of the housing company. And I rather get the impression that we're kind of trying to borrow a phrase, put the cart before the horses in trying to decide what we want to do with the housing company before we've talked about it. And so what, I think Councillor Armstrong's suggestion that we actually state whether or not we would like more social housing, you know, individually, it's possibly a good one, but maybe this isn't the right forum for it, bizarrely, because it's not, this forum isn't about the strategic direction of our housing policy. Unfortunately, it would be nice to find out, have a straw poll. But so we almost need a bit more work on this so we can work out what's possible from this housing company before we decide how we can repurpose it. Do we not? And because we could talk about this for a long time and not actually come up with anything that's actually workable or possible in terms of how the company is set up. And this is that's the kind of information that we need. But I think Henry Gordon Lennox is quite right when he said that we actually firstly need a strategic direction on our housing strategy and what we actually want to achieve as a council before we can decide whether this company can achieve that. So I mean, I don't have any firm things to say on this, but it just strikes me that this possibly is the wrong forum to be deciding on our overarching housing strategy. I don't know what other people think.
I think just in response to that, we need to look at the terms of reference and what it actually says. So it's to ensure East Devon Homes Limited is fit for purpose, reevaluating the business model, considering alternative business models, its role in delivery of housing generally, and how it might meet the aspirations of the council in relation to affordable housing, working with the Housing Review Board and the Housing Revenue Account to explore options for housing delivery. So it does, this forum is the right place to do it. It's just, it's a large piece of work. Councillor Thomas? You're muted.
Try and find my button, sorry about that. You're absolutely right. I mean, we keep going back to this, and the point I made right at the beginning is we've got to sort out exactly what we want to do first before we start trying to find roles for vehicles that we have that have been conspicuously unsuccessful over the past 3 years. I think we've got to actually firstly question, there were two things. First thing, as you rightly say, is we need to, I'd suggest, ask full council for a quite specific policy in terms of our priority and identification of our priorities for housing as a function, not where it comes from or how it's done, but then actually look at whether quite seriously consider whether East Devon Homes Limited, as opposed to East Devon Homes, has a role at all. Because I must admit, I've got significant doubts whether it has, and it merely becomes a deflection that has potential to take an enormous amount of resource and cost without actually delivering anything fundamental that we couldn't do better through another route. But, you know, that's just a personal view. So I must admit, I find myself questioning whether the housing company actually has a role at all.
Thank you, Councillor Thomas. John, do you want to come in there?
If I may, Chair, just to say that the council has very clearly stated that the provision of affordable social housing, subsidised housing, however you like to call it, is an absolute priority of the council. So it's stated very clearly in the council plan, and I believe that the new council plan will say the same. It's in the housing strategy stated very clearly, and indeed in our housing service plan. So to my mind, it's unquestionable that the need underpins the priority that that we have given it. We need more affordable housing delivered to complement what we already have. We're a good landlord, and what we need is a lot more housing. And I think that is already clearly a priority for the council.
Thanks, John. Ed Freeman.
Thank you, Chairman. I just wonder if the report on housing needs might help to focus the meeting in terms of moving forward, because it strikes me it gives us up-to-date evidence on what is needed in terms of what is the housing need in the district. And it seems to me a logical next step on from that report is then to look at, well, what is being provided by the private sector, by housing developers, what's being provided by the registered providers, and then what's the gap in the market in terms of what of our identified needs is not being delivered, and therefore that could form an option or a number of options in terms of where the housing company could go to ensure that it's filling a gap in terms of our housing needs that's not being met by other parties. So we're not treading on other people's toes or trying to reinvent the wheel. We are doing something different and bringing forward something that's and addressing needs that are not currently being met. I think one of the things that really struck me about the housing needs report that we've recently received and is on the agenda is the clear need for housing for people with long-term illnesses and disability, and how extra care and sheltered housing for the elderly that are clear needs, substantial needs that are being shown through the study that just aren't being met, it seems at the moment. So I wonder if there's something in that in terms of a structure to a report that starts off with housing needs, looks at what's being met by other parties and where the gaps are, to focus minds on fulfilling the needs that are not currently being met. Thank you.
Thank you, Ed. So with Ed's suggestion there, could I just propose from the chair that we just note this agenda item and then we move on to the housing need report from Ed Freeman?
Certainly, Mr. Chair.
Forum members be happy with that? Can you just give us a yes, no?
Yeah.
Just with the green text. Okay, that's...
Okay, Chairman, you've got at the moment 4 votes, or sorry, 5, towards noting the report and moving on to the next agenda item.
So that's passed. So we'll move on to agenda item number 6, housing need. Ed Freeman, over to you.
Thank you, Chairman. So I probably started introducing this when I spoke last, but just so that members are aware, this is a piece of research that's been carried out for the purposes of supporting production of the new local plan and identifying the housing needs within the district over the next 20 years. So I think what's been circulated is an executive summary of the report. The full report goes to Strategic Planning Committee on the 20th of October. But there's some key headlines just to draw out of the report and the executive summary. I think has been highlighted already, we have an acute need for affordable housing in the district. House prices in East Devon have been rising steadily, but remain massively higher than average salaries. I think 9.3 times the average salary is the average house price. which makes housing unaffordable to a large proportion of the population. We've included an example to illustrate this point, in that if you're trying to buy an average 2-bedroom property in the district and you have a 10% deposit and you're applying a 3.5% mortgage income 3.5 times mortgage income multiplier, you would need an annual income of £54,100 a year simply to buy an average 2-bedroom house in the district, which just underlines the unaffordability of the majority of housing in the district and this need for social housing. The study's shown that over 1,824 households living in unsuitable housing in the district, largely through overcrowding. There's an average requirement of 461 affordable homes per year to be provided over the next 20 years, which illustrates what a large proportion of our total need that is, because the projected growth is 656 households per year in the district. So you've got a very large proportion of those, sort of 2/3, that are actually going to need affordable housing. And as I said, another key thing I think to come out of this is about the particular types of housing, whether it's affordable or market housing. This study was about also identifying needs for housing for all stages of life, in effect. So not just affordable housing for perhaps people coming onto the housing ladder at a young age or later, but also in terms of housing for people with disabilities, long-term illnesses, which shows a really acute need that's currently going unmet for a minimum addition of 4,827 adapted homes over the next 20 years. And in addition to that, 730 wheelchair adapted homes. These are needs that the private sector is obviously reluctant to deliver. We've tried to put policies in place and have delivered some, but there's obviously under provision in that area, and also under provision in terms of sheltered and extra care homes, with potential need for around 6,412 additional sheltered extra care homes, sheltered or extra care homes in East Devon over the next 20 years as well, which equates to 320 homes per year, which is a massive need. So there are significant needs coming forward in the district, and this is why I say I think it's worth bearing these in mind when looking at the direction of travel for the housing company and how it can assist to potentially meet these needs, particularly potentially picking up those that are not currently being met by the providers that are currently in place. So hopefully this is useful context to inform your debate. Happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Freeman. So I'll invite non-forum members first to speak. So Councillor Rowland.
Thanks, Chair. And thanks to Ed. It just sort of reinforced what I've always thought about what the real housing needs are in our area. That was one of the reasons why at the very beginning of this meeting, when you gave me the opportunity to speak, that I did raise the issue about social housing and the different types of housing that's needed to meet the needs. I suppose if I could take this opportunity now to ask a question as well about the housing revenue account. From the right to buy proceeds that we've received to date, as I understand it, we are in danger of a large chunk of that having to go back to the government because it's not been used. I don't quite know what the figures are on that. I should know off the top of my head. But is that true that we have a situation soon that a large chunk of that money has to be returned because we haven't utilised it? And when you look at the history of the housing company where nothing's been produced out of that over 3 years and the constraints that we have through the housing revenue account, I'm really pleased that we're having this debate today because I think it is engendering that discussion about, well, what vehicles could we be using in future to deliver what's really needed in the district. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Owen. Councillor Paul Miller.
Thanks. Just wanted to highlight what Jack said, that the housing needs report, it really does highlight and reinforce what is an increasing housing need over the past few years. I mean, in Exmouth alone, I think house prices have been rising 8 times the national average. That was the last figure I saw for my town. And of course, Exmouth is where we get the greatest housing needs. So I myself get quite a lot of casework when it comes to people in housing difficulties. So this is something I feel very passionate about. I'm disappointed in a way that the TAF doesn't seem to have a strategy here yet. And I think the members of the TAF, I recommend, meet informally over the next few weeks to try and really come up with a firm strategy in terms of what we want this TAF to deliver. And I'm sorry, I'm almost moving it back to the last agenda item, but I think it is relevant to this one, because when you look at the acute housing need in East Devon, you look at what's been happening recently with the not collapse, but the huge strain on the hospitality industry and in the districts. And recently, I think a couple of months ago, we received quite a disquieting report from Mark Williams, the CEO, about the increase in the claims for benefits in our district as well. All of which means that housing is becoming much more unaffordable, and that is, these goalposts are moving on a week by week, month by month basis. So I think we need a clear strategy, and my worry is about building social housing. I believe in social housing. I think it's a fantastic. I wish we could do it, but current government policy means for every social home we build, we lose 2 or 3. And that's awful, but it's where we are in the next 3 or 4 years at least under this government, because they're not going to change the policy. So I think we need to look at this housing TAF in view of affordable housing. I know it's not affordable for many, but it's better than nothing, because affordable housing doesn't go to buy-to-let landlords. So you can argue there's an inclusive growth you get from building affordable housing. And temporary accommodation, I bang on about this a lot, but I think it's really important, because I think the good thing about temporary accommodation is that people who go into it can stay there for 3 years. We know we have a huge need for temporary accommodation, and we know we spend nearly £300,000 a year at the moment, and that will probably grow on putting homeless residents in private B&Bs. If we built them ourselves, we're not paying those huge costs for private hotels and B&Bs. So I'm just giving some ideas to the TAF, a couple of ideas of where the focus could be, because I definitely think it shouldn't be about delivering homes for commercial, at commercial rates. I don't think that's the right thing to do, because I don't think it promotes the inclusive growth that we need in the district. So I don't think it would have any economic benefits. So I agree with Andrew Moulding, who said earlier that it needs to be focusing on affordables. But that's my contribution, and that will be my only contribution today. But thanks very much.
Thank you, Councillor Miller. Councillor Pook.
Thank you, and apologies for being late. I was actually on site breaking ground and knocking down, demolishing for affordable housing, which is actually being built. Anyway, just got that little advertiser in. The housing need in the towns and the big towns, the urban areas, I think it's always going to be hard to deliver this, because we are going to be competing again. There's no other land available. It's all going to be on a commercial basis. And unless we can actually dictate this through some sort of policy, through something, so if there's a new development coming through, we can actually dictate there's going to be some affordable housing in there. I think it's going to be hard for us to do anything except through the HRA use, using HRA lands, existing land in the towns and in the larger towns. But I think a housing need which is to some extent ignored or camouflaged by the overall figures is the housing need in the smaller towns and villages. And I get lots of contacts on these where you have people who are wanting to have houses in a town or a village. It's a town or village they've lived in all their lives. And if you can actually keep people in their family groups, there's all sorts of social cohesion benefits and things from that. And I think that is a housing need which is submerged under sort of like maybe a supply via a large development in an adjoining conurbation, say, within a ward, and it means that the housing need in a smaller village is perceived to be completed or fulfilled because there's other houses there, whilst there's a tremendous housing need in these villages. And it's not for big developments of 30, 40, 50 houses. It's 10 houses here, 8 houses there, which allow people who lived in villages and have got their family in them to stay in their villages. And that is going back, I know, to the other agenda. I don't know what size of, how big the aims of the ambitions of the housing company are. But if you're talking about millions of millions, yes, you can start getting involved in the towns. But if we are talking about relatively modest amounts, £1 million, £1 million, £2 million, that's the sort of money which will allow you to actually get a development done. But also, you can then, if either 100% affordable, like we are doing in Beer, or you can say, okay, we'll accept a certain amount cross subsidy and let the 30% market house cross subsidise. That way, we can have a housing company which is fulfilling a housing need which is not always shown, but is very, very much there. It can be done, with grants and with cross subsidy at virtually no cost to the council, and fulfilling, something which I'm sure all certainly councillors of small rural areas will be getting all the time. Why can't we stay in our village? The council houses, and I know the regulations, they're open to everyone in Devon. A number of times I've said, why is this person from Barnstaple, I'll use the apocryphal thing, why is this person from Barnstaple being moved into there when I've lived in the village all the time and I can't live next door to my mother? That's the need which we should be really looking at, not just the political side of getting everyone housed, but getting people housed in the sort of houses in the places they want to be lived, so we can actually fulfill and support communities. Because if you've got people, social groups living together, grandparents, parents, and children, you've got much better social support, and you're going to cure all sorts of other problems at the same time. So housing need, I'd like to make sure that when we look at it, we don't ignore the housing need in the village just because on paper it's been fulfilled by a larger development, maybe 5 miles down the road, and that's a place where a housing company, I think, could sit in quite comfortably, doing the jobs which a lot of the housing associations aren't wanting to take on now. And I can very, very much say, from my own experience of talking to many communities who want to do something but don't feel they have got the expertise to take it forward. A council has got the reputation and the ability to actually step in and do these and make these happen. So I strayed a bit away from housing need, but the housing need bit was about the villages not being covered by the larger developments. But I think that's the opportunity which our housing company should do. And it's affordable housing, and you can make it as affordable as you want. If you can cross subsidise, you could have affordable housing virtually at the same cost as social housing. If you want to maximise the number of houses and sell off fewer, then okay, it might be at the affordable rate, but it'll still be lower than the market rate. Anyway, that's it.
Thanks very much, Councillor Pook. Does any non-forum members wish to speak at this time? No. So, Councillor Hayward.
Thank you, Chair. Well, really, thank you, Councillor Pook, for saying a lot of what I'm thinking. Within this forum, within councillors, those who've served a lot longer than a great many of us, and the officers, I just think surely we have the skill set and the nous to find a way through this labyrinth. We know that the government policy is against us, so let's find a way around it by whatever mechanism, whatever legal shenanigans do we need to do to create an entity to deliver what we want. Let's do that. Let's do what Councillor Pook is suggesting. And I know that's the purpose of this forum, is to come up with those solutions, but let's do it creatively and proactively. let's just crack on. When I was at the science park earlier in the week, I was talking to Midas, and Midas were telling me that the new building, the Ada Lovelace building, is being created using modular fit outs. So they don't build, sorry, no, my correction. Another Midas project, I think in Torbay area, is being fitted out with modular kit out. So you don't have a sparky and a plumber and a plasterer coming in and doing each individual bathroom. You simply have the pod made off site to a specific specification. It's transported on a lorry, gets lifted in a crane, slotted into space. It's just like Meccano. It's just like Lego. So coming back to what John was saying about how the numbers don't stack up, you know, if we have to borrow money, we don't have access to the money. If we borrow it, the returns on rental properties won't pay it back. Well, this is where some innovation and some creativity is going to come in. If we can acquire the land, and yes, we'll have to compete, but if we can acquire the land and we can deliver modular houses, it's going to get to the point where housing need becomes so acute that having properties that we'd all love to live in, a 2 up, 2 down, might not be viable. But we want to deliver houses for people to have security of tenure, to enjoy their lives without the worry of being evicted every 5 minutes. And so if we have to deliver properties which are built in Germany, in Scandinavia, in, you know, in wherever, ideally in the UK, with the innovation that we have after what's happening early next year, then we build them off site, we transport them, we build them, we put them into place. 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 6 weeks, they're built, people can move in. Now, surely on that Henry Ford production line model of building houses, we can make the numbers stack up, because you'll simply be using economies of scale to deliver what people want. And that's all we're here for, is to deliver for the people of East Devon. We're not here to put money in the pockets of developers or the pockets of landowners. We're here to deliver social good and good for the people of East Devon. And if some commerciality creeps in, so be it. But there must be a way. Otherwise, we're going to go round and round in circles. Let's put all of us together and work out how we do it. Let's have, you know, if we need to meet informally off-site and shout at each other, so be it. I'd rather not. Let's act in a kind, you know, measured way, but get over the finish line. Otherwise, we will never deliver anything. And it's only the people of East Devon who will lose out. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks very much. Any other forum members wish to speak at this time? Okay. Are there any proposals wishing to come out for this item? The forum needs to give me something here.
Perhaps, Dan, just to suggest that we use this report as the basis for defining where the shortfall is in the provision of housing in East Devon, and what steps the council can take to address that, and considering all the options. But I think, having commissioned this, we ought to use it and really make the best use we can of it to inform our future planning.
So is that a proposal there, Ollie?
I guess it was.
Would anyone like to second that?
Certainly will, Mr. Chair. Councillor Hayward.
Thank you, Councillor Hayward. Councillor Moulding?
I think, Chairman, that what we need to establish from this meeting, which the Housing Needs Report has given us, is that the need, and Megan Armstrong asked pretty well the blindingly obvious, that do we need social housing in East Devon? Yes, of course we need social housing in East Devon, and that's what the needs report has told us. So I think the one resolution, if we need it to come out of this meeting, is that East Devon needs social housing. And if the housing company is a means to deliver that social housing, we should make every effort to meet that need.
Thank you, Councillor Moulding. Councillor Moulding, was that another proposal? Or an
Most
amendment?
certainly it was, if I can get a seconder.
Would anyone like to second that?
Well, I will, yeah. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Armstrong. John, do you want to come in at that point?
If I may, Chair, yeah. The again, some context. That figure that Ed's just revealed in his report, I think it's 461 new affordable homes per annum. That is a vast increase on the previous survey that we, or planning colleagues, undertook some years ago, and our planning assumptions at that time and up until now have been something of the order of 250 to 300 new affordable homes per annum. So, you know, one thing that I think the TAF can suggest is that we need to realign our ambitions and our aspirations for affordable housing to a much higher figure now.
Thank you, John. Councillor Armstrong?
Oh, thanks, Chair. Yeah. I just wanted to go back to, I'm sorry I didn't come back earlier actually, to Jack's question way back about the need for us to send back right to buy funding to the government. And yes, we do. And I'm sorry I don't have the figures, the exact figure in front of me. I could find it out if you want, or John or Joe may have that figure handy. But we were supposed to, normally we would have spent the money that we buy for affordable housing. Sorry, I'm getting mixed up. For the right to buy, and we had the next 6-month extension in the summer. So we have to, as I understand it, unless anything's changed, we have to return this amount of money to the government because it's unspent by the end of December. Now, in normal circumstances, we haven't had, I don't think, and John will correct me on this, I don't think we've ever had to send back any money at all to the government under the right to buy. But because of the lockdown and the difficulty in purchasing properties in the last few months, that's why, one of the reasons why we're having to send back this money to the government, which actually just goes right against the grain with me and with everybody in housing, and I'm sure with all of us. We don't want to be sending any money back to the government. We want to be spending this money. And so that's another thing to throw into the discussion, really, that we have right to buy money that, you know, at the moment we're going to have to send back to the government. And we've got to find a way around that. So we've got to find properties or some way of spending it. But we haven't got a lot of time now. We've got 2 months to do that. So I don't know if John wants to add anything more to that. I'm sorry, as I say, I can't give you the exact figures, but it's not a small amount of money. So I think we just need to bear that in mind for future as well. Thank you.
Thank you. John, do you want to come back there? I see your hand still up.
Yeah, if I may, I should have answered that question earlier, because while the debate's been going on, I've been looking up the figure that Jack requested. It's true that we had to enter into an agreement with the government to spend right to buy receipts in a defined period of time. It's a rolling programme. It's quite draconian in my view. That's our money to spend, but we had to sign up to the agreement. And as Megan has just said, we've never had to pay the money back to government because we've always spent it on acquisitions. In Q3 of this period, we've got just over £1 million to spend. We're determined to spend that. We're looking at a number of potential acquisitions at the moment. Roughly during the course of the year, there's £1 million to spend in Q1, Q2, Q3, and then there's £2 million to spend in Q4. and we report regularly on our progress on spend to the Housing Review Board.
Thank you, John.
Thank you, John. Yeah.
So we've had 2 proposals. Could we, Councillor Thomas, do you want to just come in there? You're muted.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. Just to confirm, I've actually understood what John's just said correctly. So we've got 3/4 at £1 million to spend, plus 1/4 at 2, so a total of £5 million per year to spend of right to buy receipts. Now you're saying that all of that's going back to government?
Now I'm saying our intention is that none of that's going back to government, but that is quite a significant amount of money to spend over the short term. When we're looking at how we spend that, there's a number of acquisitions that are being explored at the moment.
Yeah, but we're talking about within a 2-month timescale, you've got £5 million to spend. And I assume spend kicks off at the point of completion.
No, for Q3, there's £1 million to spend.
So Q2 has been spent already, the £2 million there. Right, thank you.
Yeah.
Right, that's just a little bit.
Sorry if I wasn't clear.
I was thinking, blimey, 5 million squids sitting there. I mean, Jeff Pook sitting there wringing his hands in beer. And thankfully he's muted as well.
Councillor Hayward.
Thank you, Chair. Just some clarification. I don't buy and sell houses on a regular basis, so perhaps I'm speaking out of turn. But I can't see any circumstances, and I need to ask another question after this, any circumstances where we give anything back. You know, we've got money. It's not as if there are not properties up for sale in the wider East Devon area. And perhaps I'm just not looking at this the right way, but why would we give any money back when we have the potential to buy it? I mean, if you're getting to the last 10 minutes where you've got to return it, just buy it. Go to any estate agent and say, right, we'll have that. We've got an in-house legal team. We have legal expertise. We have the money. We have the need. We know we want to put people in houses. I can't even perceive why we would give money back under any circumstances. The second question is, does the spend, and this echoes something that was said earlier by one of my colleagues, does it have to be spent on a physical property, bricks and mortar already built, or can it be spent through some legal contrivance on the land to enable some self-build to build? I'm sure the answer to that is what I fear it will be, but it's worth asking the question. Thank you.
John, could you come back with that?
Yeah, there are tight restrictions on what we can and can't spend on, and indeed those figures that are quoted, they can only contribute 30% towards the cost of acquisition. So the housing revenue account has to raise the remaining amount of money. Off the top of my head, I don't think we can spend on anything other than new development or property acquisitions, which is where we've spent most of the money because of the tight timescales required. And we've got no intention of paying that back to government, but Tim and colleagues in housing are constantly searching the market for suitable acquisitions.
Thank you, John.
Thanks, John. So just to recap, we've got 2 proposals. Could we just go over what the proposals were again? Could the officers help with that?
Henry, are you picking that up or am I? Lost Henry. So I think, are we going back to Ed's original proposal that we look at housing needs as the start of of the process for going back to the previous item. So they start to, does somebody just want to recap what they were proposing?
Councillor Moulding, can you just recap on what you proposed?
Yes, Chairman, I merely said that we would be reaffirming the need for social housing as demonstrated by the housing needs report that Ed Freeman gave us today, and that we should be attempting to use the housing company as a vehicle for delivering that social need.
Thank you.
And I had a seconder.
Yeah. And then
I'm sorry about that, Chair. I didn't understand that. I'm not sure that I can second that really. I didn't understand the second bit of that that we're using the housing company to identify that, because from all the past discussion, I'm not sure that we actually can. So if somebody else can be found to second that, I'd prefer it really.
So what are we using the housing company for if we're not using it for delivering social housing?
We haven't decided yet, have we? That's the whole point of this meeting.
Okay, so Councillor Moulding has put out a proposal. Is there a seconder for that? No, there's no seconder. So we move on to Councillor Davies' proposal, which we've lost Councillor Davey from the meeting.
Going well, isn't it?
It's going really well.
I didn't. Sue, Alethea, did you have oh, Councillor Thomas has got his hand in the air, I can see. Did somebody notice?
Hello?
Thomas?
Has somebody got a note of Councillor Davies?
Do you want, so Councillor Davies says to use the housing need report as the basis for defining where the shortfall is in housing for East Devon, and use the report to be able to address this. And then I think Councillor Moulding went on basically again to establish that everybody identified that there was a need for social housing in East Devon. And then he suggested that the housing company would be the means to delivering that need for social housing.
Thank you, Alethea. So Councillor Davies' proposal has been proposed and seconded. So could I just move that we take a vote on that? So could members either give a green tick for yes so that they go along with it, or a red cross for no? Could you do that now, please?
Okay, so you've got 5 votes for Councillor Davies' proposal to use the housing needs report as the basis for defining where the shortfall is in housing need for East Devon, and to use a report to address this.
Thanks very much, Alethea. So we'll move on to agenda item 7, which is the review of what the TAF would like to achieve. So could I ask for comments from non-forum members first, please? What would you like this TAF to achieve? Councillor Miller.
To take Ian Hall's idiom, to put meat on the bone, I think needs to happen with some officer reports actually laying out what's possible. There's been some discussion today about the various business models. Ian Thomas came up with an idea about investing in a local developer, which I thought was very interesting. Andrew Moulding spoke about a arm's length not-for-profit company. There's a little bit of disagreement, but uncertainty about exactly what kinds of homes the TAF wants to procure. So I think that needs to be needs to decide on that. My clear view is that if it was exclusively on social housing, this TAF doesn't have a very good business model, because, as I say, the right to buy rules mean that for every home you invest in, you lose 2. So it would make no sense from my point of view to make that the very strict scope of this company. So I think really from this meeting, the part I've been in, there's not much to review, in the sense that I don't think, and I think everybody will probably concede this, I don't think we have a clear mission statement for the company yet. And I think I'd like to think that perhaps the next urgent priority of this TAF is to meet again and spend the entire meeting deciding what the mission statement is and make it clear, and everybody needs to agree on it, because at the moment I feel as though there are some members that wanted it to be one thing and there are some other members that wanted to be something completely different. So yeah, I think that's what needs to happen going forward.
Thank you, Councillor Miller. Councillor Jackson.
Thank you, Chair. I've been listening to the back and forth, and I think there are a couple of things that I'd like to see come out of the TAF, and part of that is, as Councillor Miller suggested, a clear strategy, a clear understanding of what obviously we hope to achieve with the housing company. But I think half of the problem is we've identified that yes, there is a need, but we haven't really got to the crux of the matter, which is why and what we would like to do to plug the gap, because there are so many potential options, which I think is why you're probably all struggling a little bit at the moment to kind of identify a way forwards, because there's so many possibilities, but we don't actually know what's physically achievable and legally achievable, what options there are, to what constraints there are to work within. So I think perhaps first, in order for this to even be productive, members of the TAF need a little bit more information around those things. I mean, you could be looking at opportunities where you become a commercial renting outfit, where you build properties, but you charge rents that are much, much lower than the going rate, but not perhaps as low as our social housing, which act more like the mum and dad's garage effect. So you buy people time, but they're on strict leases, strict rentals. So you have a certain term, maybe 3 years, for example, and beyond that you have to find something else, but giving you time to save money or to explore other options. Maybe it wouldn't take you off of the waiting list for social housing, but perhaps it's modular, perhaps it's not rental, perhaps it's to sell. But I don't think at the moment the TAF members know enough to be able to kind of really explore their aspirations and come up with that strategy. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jackson. Councillor Marianne Rickson, do you want to come in at that point?
Thank you, Chair. I apologise if some of these points have been raised, but I was unable to join the meeting right from the start. One thing that I'm very, very keen on, and have mentioned previously in other meetings, is I'm very, very keen on passive house standards for future building. And I would hope this would be not just for any housing that we build, but whatever we can do to encourage developers to go along the same route, because we're never going to achieve our climate goals if we don't. And I also have mentioned in, I think, an overview meeting, the possibility of shared ownership, because that is another way of providing housing. But we as a council could build the housing, but retain the ownership. It gives people the opportunity to have a home at a really affordable rent, which then gives them the opportunity to perhaps save so they could move on if they want to. So that's kind of building on what Councillor Jackson was just saying.
Thank you, Councillor Rickson. Henry, do you want to come in?
Yeah, sorry, Chair, and well, sorry, apologies for not being able to come back earlier. I was having trouble unmuting myself. So obviously, having listened to the debate, I was wondering if it might help in terms of sort of future direction. And I appreciate you've already voted on other matters, but there are two different aspects to this. You've got what is clearly a desire to increase social housing. You know, that seems to be a pretty uniform comment across the membership, non-membership. So would it be worth just saying that the goal of the TAF is to increase social housing, and it will look at options to facilitate this in terms of, I was going to say a cost-benefit analysis, but it's not really, probably more accurately SWOT analysis, but some sort of analysis about the various options that there are as a higher level approach. but then specifically also reviewing the housing company, what it was set up to achieve in terms of the legal framework and its limitations, and what it could do to help achieve what comes out of the first part, which is increasing social housing. So you do have a tandem, a sort of interlocking approach to this, but the clear driver is to increase social housing, and that may or may not be with the housing company.
Completely agree, and I'm happy to move that from the chair. Councillor Ellen Rylance.
Thank you, Chair. So to my mind, the value of us having a housing company, theoretically, is that we can actually, it's a local housing company for local people, if you will. We can actually translate our local housing needs and the actual specifics of our residents into a plan that would deliver the right sort of housing. Because at the moment, I feel like we want to achieve something that's not really possible in national legislation. And what I'd really like to see the TAF do, the housing company do, is to be able to act as a buffer between national legislation and what we actually want, and work out how it's possible. And I think, a lot of noise happens, as Sarah just mentioned in chat actually, about affordable, because when we're talking about affordable, we're not really talking about affordable for our residents. We're talking about affordable on a sort of national tariff. And we all know of people who are completely stuck without any ability to be independent, away from their parents' home or away from their very overcrowded or poor quality house. And I really feel that if we're going to achieve anything as a council and do anything with this housing company, it should be that we actually improve the lot and improve the housing stock for the people who can't afford to buy a new house straight off the book somewhere. So I mean, I think it would be a shame to disband the housing company without understanding fully what we can do with it. And I think, as Henry just said, we really do need to understand fully what the possibilities are and what we can achieve with the housing company before we decide what to do with it. And so I would very much welcome what Henry just said, and I'm very happy to second Dan's move from the chair on that, unless it's already been seconded. Lost track there. So I just, again, baby with the bathwater thing, we wouldn't want to do that. We wouldn't want to throw out the baby with the bathwater without understanding whether it's possible to achieve what we want to achieve through the housing company, because if we could, that would be great, but we need to have more understanding.
Actually, the stuff's been sat around for quite a while, so...
Thanks very much, Councillor Rylance. Does any member of the forum wish to speak or any further on this? Or can we just take this to a vote? Okay, so we take it to a vote. If you can just vote yes with your green ticks, X for no. We'll do that now, please.
At the moment, you've just got 4 ticks, Chair.
How many members are we down to now, though?
Oh, well, that's a good question.
Councillor Thomas, are you abstaining from the vote?
I'm losing the will to live, Chair.
Oh, no, sorry. Sorry.
I'm increasingly lost of exactly what we're voting for, because we seems to be jumping around, finessing on a point. So yes, counted as an abstention.
Thank you.
So Sue, are we quorum still, and have we met the required number? Difficult to count online, isn't it? Yeah, we must still be quorum.
Yeah, we've got 4 votes for and 1 abstention, and we did have 7 members present, so it's still a majority of those present.
Thanks very much. So we'll move on to the next agenda item, which is the forward plan. So what would members like to see coming back to the next meeting or future meetings? Councillor Rickson?
I'm afraid I don't have any other comment to add because I haven't been here for the whole debate, so I think it would be unfair for me to make any further comment.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Miller?
Yeah, a clear plan, but I'd also suggest that officers look to other councils that have created these companies, because I do believe there are some, and there might be some lessons that can be learned from the delivery of successful housing companies in other parts of the country, because I think that might be able to give us a little bit more focus. That's my suggestion.
Perfect, thank you. Any other non-committee or non-forum member wish to speak at this time? No. Okay, so Councillor Hayward.
Thanks, Chair. I mean, other than the things we've already discussed, I would just like to see on the action plan a report on what methods there are in terms of passive house and modular delivery of houses that can be used to accelerate the process. You know, we need to do some research. We need to see what innovation is out there, because if it already exists, let's not reinvent the wheel. Let's just use those skills and those techniques to deliver. It may well be that the future of housing in East Devon is not bricks and mortar. Maybe it's polymers, maybe it's, you know, for those who don't want to hear it, maybe it's plastic, maybe it's wood. We don't know, but let's investigate what's available and methods that allow speedy delivery of housing, because that's going to be the driver. You know, otherwise we're going to be having these discussions in years to come because we haven't been able to import the bricks or the breeze blocks or the cement. Let's find different ways of doing it. You know, let's take a leaf out of, you know, and again, I refer to the Science Park, who have changed their build method. Every time they build something, they adapt their methods for the next building, because they learn from each one. They learn from their mistakes, they build on their successes, and they adapt to what building materials are available to achieve these high eco standards, so that the residents who live in them see their bills plummet. They see some eco good. You know, we can fulfill multiple strands of our overall council policy. We have a green policy, we have a social policy, we have a housing policy. All of it can be delivered in one fell swoop. So that's what I'd like to see, you know, on the action plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Armstrong.
Thanks, Chair. Just a quick comment on what Paul has just said. And I have had an email communication with him about this in the past. Just a word of warning about the modular housing, and obviously we've got to look into it all, but I think we just have to be very aware that modular housing, although it might provide a roof and walls, it isn't actually a home. That's what I would argue. I don't think, it depends where it is, what it is, how it's done, but we have to be very, very aware that whatever housing we get involved in, we have to make it so that it's acceptable, socially acceptable, and in an area where, much as Councillor Pook has mentioned before, where we can, you know, there is a social cohesion element as well. So it's not just about, you know, building these houses. I mean, I personally wouldn't like to. The question I would always ask is, would I want to live in one? No, I wouldn't. I wouldn't want to live in a modular house if it didn't have a garden and it didn't have, you know, the things that you would expect from a normal bricks and mortar house. But I'm not saying no to it. I'm just saying, just a word of warning, it's something that we have to seriously look at, that we're not just throwing up modular houses here, there and everywhere, just so that we can say that we haven't got a housing homelessness problem. Thank you. Sorry to be a bit negative on that, but it's just something to be aware of. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Armstrong. Councillor Hayward, do you want to come back?
Yeah, if I may. Yeah, I know that, I mean, there is a perception that when you talk about modular housing, you're talking about post-war prefabs and shipping containers stacked on top of each other. Again, I would urge every member, whether you're a member of this TAF or not, to look across the channel look at what's delivered on the continent, because there are some incredible houses that look just the same as a normal build. Now, again, I mean, I take Councillor Armstrong's point, but what is, you know, one man's meat is another man's poison. You know, what I think is beautiful isn't necessarily what others will. And we have to deliver houses. That's a given. I mean, everyone in this room knows it, you know, by hook or by crook, we have to deliver them. But it's going to be innovation. And I don't particularly, you know, fancy seeing villages spring up like some sort of Brazilian favela of containers stacked on top of each other. They work in some environments, perhaps in a more urban environment, and indeed in Bristol, they've done a wonderful development there. That might not suit East Devon, but modular developments built on an eco-friendly basis. I mean, the Swedes do it incredibly well, the Danes do it incredibly well. And I just think we get fixated on this thing. Well, this is what we've got. They must all look the same. You know, not everyone wants a garden. Some people, and Councillor Jackson has just put up a comment, some people would rather have a 1 or 2 bedroom property that they can call their own with security of tenure, with a small garden or even a shared garden in a courtyard, rather than being in a pokey B&B or a tent or sofa surfing. You know, we are not the arbiters of what people want. That's why the previous thing about let's look at the housing needs, let's talk to residents and say, if you have a choice between A and B, what would you prefer? The fact I don't want to live in it is completely immaterial. It isn't about me. It's not about Councillor Armstrong. It's about no one in this room. It's about the best for the people of East Devon. So I take Councillor Armstrong's point entirely, that we don't just want to knock up prefabs that, you know, are only designed to last a few years to get us out of a fix. We want longevity. We want, you know, some degree of aesthetic beauty. You know, we live in a beautiful part of the world, but we need pragmatism and innovation above all else. So cast your eye further afield than East Devon and look at what can be delivered. The other day I spoke about Viennese social housing. The people in Vienna have hit the nail on the head. Yes, they're apartment blocks, but people are chomping at the bit to live in them. They don't each have a garden, but they still look beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hayward. Does any other forum member wish to speak? Could we have a proposal for the forward plan then, please? Henry, you're muted.
So sorry, so easy to watch everybody else go, oh, and then do it yourself. I think if you're happy as a collective for that to be added, I think you can just add it, Chair. I don't think you need to take a vote.
Thank you, I appreciate that. Okay, so that brings our meeting to an end. I'd like to thank everyone, really thank everyone, including the member of public watching online, for taking part. However, can I remind all those present that the supporting officer will confirm when the meeting is no longer being recorded or going live. And until then, your comments will be live to the public.
Thank you, Chair. Outstanding meeting.